It's just there's so many interesting things that I'm seeing more that's happening. That could be better talent, that could be more opportunities in terms of partnership with, let's say, people you thought were competitors, but they're actually maybe more complementary. So there are some really unique insights that we're seeing.
Welcome to this episode of FinTech and Web3 Founders. Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on, Ronit. It's great to meet you.
Where are you zooming in from today?
From Dubai, Barsha Heights. It's not
Excellent,
too far.
excellent. So only our dear friend Gaurav seems to have disappeared from Dubai. So
hey,
you're welcome to. You're welcome to
the capital today.
You're in the capital today.
I've been up to a lot. I'm seeing his Instagram. I see a lot of cars, and I'm just like, no idea what's going on.
A lot of fast cars, right? A lot of fast cars on his Instagram account this week.
A lot of old fast cars, yeah.
A lot of old fast cars, vintage, classic.
Classic, just
Classic.
like me, classic. Thanks for joining us, Ahmed.
Excellent, excellent. Now, let's talk about Ahmed rather than Gaurav's classic fast cars. Biconomy. Tell us about Biconomy and tell us about how you got involved.
Yeah, for sure. So Biconomy is all about how we could reduce all these complex blockchain complexities that we see right now that users actually have to face whenever they interact with any Web3 application. And what we do is essentially remove all of these pain points and complexities away from them, right? And so what we do is we empower developers with the right tools so that they can enable things like one-click experiences, easier transactions, and just a better onboarding experience for their users. So, it's been around 3 years since we started Biconomy, and really the way we started was me and my two co-founders came together. We were actually just, doing staking. So if you guys know, back in the day, Tezos kind of released their their validator setup, which was delegated proof of stake, where you could sort of build your own node, start validating transactions, but you could then also get other people to come in and stake their tokens to your node. So we did that just as a side hustle, really. And then just from there, we realized, okay, right, the networks are kind of, secure, but where's the adoption, right? And then there was probably just a few hundred daily active users across the whole of Web3 in 2019. And then we just thought, all right, clearly we need to get more users. Things are secure, but we need to get more users. And so that's how we sort of started our journey.
Can you expand those 2 points, please? Number one, things are secure. What do you mean? You mean the underlying blockchain or blockchains
correct.
You felt were functional, had a purpose, and the number of users?
Yeah.
Though, in your view, and if you have thoughts on where we are today, a number of daily active users or monthly active users, and all years.
Yeah, no, it's that's actually a good question. So back then, for sure, and even till now, we could easily say Bitcoin, Ethereum as just core blockchains are secure, they're running. It's very hard to really attack these systems. And even back then, just as a proof of concept, well, when they went live, it was great, they went live, or at least Tezos in that instance went live without a glitch, really, and the delicate proof of stake sort of system works. But the applications that were on these blockchains just didn't have users. And so, again, it was that bear market, in 2018, 2019, that kind of rolled on to the beginning of 2020, was just very, very extreme. And so you literally just had core people maybe using Uniswap or using just, these other applications that were there. But at the same time, the infrastructure also wasn't ready in terms of other pieces that's needed to actually scale applications, make them sort of user friendly. And there's just other instances that are a part of that. And so And when we compare it to today, things are definitely better. They're still not there yet to like allow us to get to maybe hundreds of millions of users, but at least we're seeing, tens of thousands of daily active users. It's kind of hitting maybe just 100 or so thousands of daily active users across these platforms. So that's cool to see. But again, we're not in the we're not even in the millions of daily active users, right?
So when you talk about those active user numbers, you're talking about Web3 overall, or the
Web3. I'm not talking about exchanges. I'm not talking about centralized. Sure. Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm just talking about like active users who are actually doing something on a public chain. Yeah.
Right. And what those activities typically be, if you looked at the overall market?
Yeah.
What are people doing? And then specifically, if you zoomed in on Biconomy, what are the classic end use cases that people use you as? And we'll come back to unpacking a bit more what you guys do, but let's focus on the end use cases first.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, we've definitely seen DeFi as a use case, which has come around since 2020. The other use case I would maybe club sort of, let's say, Metaverse and NFTs as one as well, right? Because that is something I didn't expect it to be that quick, right? But that is great to see, like how quickly it's emerged in the past year or so. So that's another use case. The third is gaming. Gaming is still not as large as it can be, right? But I do feel that's its own segment of its own. The fourth is social as well. The social category, if you think about it, is going to be really huge. We're just scratching the surface with what we're seeing with like Lens as a platform, or maybe Farcaster. Again, these are Web3 native, but it's just scratching the surface. You then have activity coming in from so we have these, let's say, like verticals, which kind of, like, if you think about it, are actual real verticals in the real world, right? It's just that they kind of come from the bottom, like ground up, right, in terms of being Web3 native. But then when we kind of like just zoom out and see how actual enterprises are coming in, right, or even just Web2 companies, it's great to see Reddit with their how they're utilizing Web3 for their NFTs in the community. How we're seeing different just consumer brands actually sort of coming in as well. So there are these, like, all use cases will eventually just become horizontal across current industries, right? It's just but that sort of merge and intersection hasn't happened yet.
So if I summarize what you're saying, if I leave aside like the trading and the speculative part of crypto and Web3, non-financial or non-trading, non-trading use cases, these are still tens of thousands rather than millions of users out there on a daily active number.
Correct.
And then if you broke it down, you mentioned Metaverse and NFTs. Now, maybe 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 12 months ago, there was a lot of excitement around NFTs. As Gaurav knows, it's still a topic, particularly the broader Metaverse question that I'm spending a lot of time on, but in the broad public domain, particularly once you get outside the Dubai bubble, it seems to be that we're in that kind of trough of disillusionment almost. If you think of the hype cycle, the peak was Q4 2021, and now a lot of people, I'm sure when magazines writing their 2023 previews the year ahead, they'll be talking about how the Metaverse and NFTs were one big hype thingy or scam or whatever. Or how do you see this playing out right now? Given the drop in activity levels and valuations in the NFT world, are we in this kind of long winter ahead for NFTs and the open or the decentralized metaverse? Or is this a blip, and by next summer we'll have forgotten all about this kind of gloom and doom that's surrounding the NFT world at the moment?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, how I would, I mean, there is a really compelling way to think about like, are we still in, are we in that sort of trough of disillusionment, or we still haven't reached that actual peak yet, right? And there is that concept as well, because you know, I feel like Web3 is still so early that we still haven't really broken into like actual, you know, let's say actual use, right? Like the internet did have you know, post 2002 or 2003, right? And so, you know, I feel like we still haven't gotten Web3 really into, you know, into a sort of a big number of people that we can get to even a higher peak, right? So I think that question, like that is still, that question is still, you know, open for conversation and for sort of debate. But just to answer your question as well on how long it will be, like it will be pretty long, right? And this is not just NFTs, but even DeFi as well, and everything that we're seeing in sort of the open source spectrum of Web3, because you know the whole FTX thing did set us back, for sure. It might actually set us back a year or so more. So yeah, I mean it's a great time for builders, and I kind of want to like just I wore this t-shirt for this podcast, in it for the tech. I don't know if you guys could see it. Yeah, so this is what this, you know,
That's what we all say in the bear market, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm wearing this t-shirt more these days, because it is actually like, just as even as a founder, it's just there's so many interesting things that I'm seeing more that's happening, that could be better talent, that could be more opportunities in terms of partnership with, let's say, people you thought were competitors, but they're actually maybe more complementary. So there are some really unique insights that we're seeing in this market.
Now, gaming. Gaming's often held up as a potential big driver of Web3 adoption. And as we kind of know, there was quite a lot of hype around play to earn games, and
yeah,
hasn't really, I mean, that whole thing, like what happened to play to earn? I mean, like that was hyped up by our friends on the West Coast massively, right? We won't mention names on this pod, but you know, Harry Hindsight, but that was like, and then did we just all realize that most of us sort of play to play? I mean, we could have asked our kids this, right, and worked this out. I mean, most people don't want to, you know, they want to play, work, right? That's the whole point of.
Exactly. No, I mean, I totally agree. I never understood the play to earn thing. Like I just, it just did not make sense. Again, like I would say I'm more of a, I would say I'm a gamer, but I'm more of a like a console gamer, right? I'm not a PC gamer. And so I love my FIFA, right? I play just because I want to unwind. You know, and you know, like, and when you look at all the just business models of games, they make money by people, you know, paying to play. You know, they buy packs, or they're, you know, somewhat addicted, or and that's the thing. And that's when I realized that there's a big difference between real games that, you know, these you know, game publishers actually create versus these, let's say, addictive, like high dopamine type games, right, where it's no way will it ever be play to earn, because it's pay to play. That's what those addictive games are for, right? And so for me, it just never made sense. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of glad it kind of really got phased out very quickly, in the way it did.
Yeah. And so let's sort of think about the end users of your product, your platform, the Biconomy product. What kind of clusters or areas of Web3 do you see most potential or growth in the sort of 1 to 2 year horizon? Like, what are they trying to build on top of you? Because I guess you're like the infrastructure. Can I call it infrastructure layer? I don't know how best to. Blockchain as a service.
Middleware infrastructure. Yeah, middleware infrastructure. That's what it is. So no, that's a great question. So really, for the reason why you know, we work with So actually, let me start off with that. We as, you know, as let's say a product, we actually are very general in our solution. So we could tap into a DeFi use case, an NFT use case, gaming. We serve all types, right? We even serve JP Morgan for their DeFi trade as well. And so we are in a way use case agnostic in that sense. So really for us, where we come into play, we are essentially, how can we easily onboard end users, you know, like new end users onto applications, because that's sort of one big struggle. And then after that, how do their end users actually have better retention and also just better transaction management, right? So if let's break that down. Onboarding is all about wallets, right? And so we are agnostic to wallets in the sense that we could essentially work with any wallet. And at the same time, once the end user is onboarded, they want to be able to do different types of transactions, right? Which we like to call it, right? How can we make this more intuitive, like just Web2 like? So things like one-click experiences, paying gas fees in different tokens, allowing the end user maybe not having to pay gas fees at all, right? And that was our actual, like, that's how we started. Our first product was gasless, right? It was the idea where end users won't pay gas, and it's the application that's paying all the gas fees for the end users, right? And it's up to that application to think about how they monetize elsewhere, right? And so far we've done over 25 million gasless transactions. We've served over 200 projects, such as like the Sandbox, Decentraland, Zedron. And for us, the thesis is that gas fees will come down as blockchain scale. But this actually makes it easier for applications to both monetize and actually subsidize this gas. But then there was both a need to do more and to give you more unique transaction experiences for the users of our customers. If that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. I want to bring Gaurav into the conversation. I'm sure he's got many more questions, particularly about the business itself. I've asked a lot of macro and just industry questions. But over to you, Gaurav.
Thanks a lot, brother. Yeah, it's been super interesting. I just reflecting on everything you guys are talking about, and there's so much terminology that keeps going around during these conversations we have, especially with somebody from the space. And it just made me reflect for a second, right? I mean, I don't think anyone today can say they were born into crypto, right? It's been such a short time and in space in which this is started and still developing. There's so much to do and engage with in this space, right? It's very young. And when I'm looking at this, I actually want to hear just a bit about the story, because what is your background, Ahmed?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not a developer, but we're like selling products to developers.
Right. What's your background?
Yeah.
Because I remember parts of the story leading up to this, but before you got to your podcast, everything else, tell us a bit about your story, your background, the podcast, and then how you started this. I'd like to, if you can go through that journey, that'd be really great for our people. Because you walked through this, right? You didn't jump into this, and I want you to walk us.
That is true. No, you're absolutely right. So funnily enough, like if we were to start just a bit maybe way back, was it like I studied economics, was about to graduate. I, funny enough, couldn't find a job, like be very honest, couldn't find a job. But I had an opportunity to learn Mandarin in China for free for 2 years. So this is a Chinese scholarship, like from the government of China, to learn Mandarin, and this is all paid for. They give you a stipend, and they give you like an actual like free accommodation university campus.
Wow.
And the other option I had was do a 1-year master's at London Business School and pay £20,000. And then, I was just like talking with a Chinese MC in London. I was like, look, okay, I might want to go to Shanghai. What is the best university in Shanghai? I had no idea. Like I just went into it. But this I actually jumped, right? and literally told me like, pick this university, it's the best, whatever. So I went to China with like no knowledge, absolutely, right? Like what I'm getting into. And it turns out like the university I was in was actually like it's like a Harvard or a Cambridge of China. I had no idea, right? And so, and especially in Chinese culture, where you study is a really big deal. Like it's like you've exited a company sort of deal. Like that's how big of a deal it is. And so those 2 years were great because it was during my first year where again I was like no idea what I'm going to do after China. I remember I had a final interview for a Google internship in Dubai in the Middle East, and I got rejected at the final stage, and I was like, what am I going to do? No idea what to do. And then I just stumbled into Bitcoin and everything, right? And I did have internships with like Citibank and Dow Jones like during that whole time, but I just didn't sort of enjoy those environments as much. But I kind of got into the space, luckily like managed to find like this crypto community, and I learned so much more about economics through learning about Bitcoin than I did in my economics degree, which is crazy. Yeah, sorry, Gaurav, you said something.
The community you found was while you were in China, is what you're saying?
Yeah, whilst I was in China. And so, yeah, I mean, I sort of found this community. Vitalik also used to be there all the time, which is great. And then I joined a company as a blockchain researcher because I really wanted to just get into the weeds of the technology, loved the whole sort of approach to how just blockchains worked. And then I sort of finished sort of my I was working with this company until my visa expired in China, my studies finished. And then they asked me to go out to Dubai and just help them out, set up an office in Dubai. So I was like, yeah, why not? And then it was really during that time where I think I definitely met Gaurav during that time when I was, helping this Chinese company. They were called Metaverse. They built a blockchain called Metaverse. So they were way ahead of the time.
Wow.
But also at the same time, they were a bit, a bit fishy, but we'll keep it at that. And so that's when I decided to start like doing the podcast because I realized when I was in the UAE, there was not much happening in Web3. And so it was more like I kind of wanted to meet the who's who in crypto, and the best way to do that is through a podcast, but to also just shine more light into what's happening in the region. So started doing the podcast with Faisal Al-Hawi from Smart Dubai. Well, he's not in Smart Dubai anymore, but he's in Amazon right now. But he was working with Smart Dubai back then, and yeah, we sort of like grew the podcast. I eventually left that Chinese company and worked with Jabbar Internet Group. So Samir and the guys there, they were looking into Web3, and they wanted to sort of also build something around in the STO, like security token space. Security tokens we don't need to get into because I haven't really popped off yet. And yeah, anyways, that's a different topic. But it was really during that time when I was working with Jabbar, and we were just looking at Web3, and they like some investments were made more on the liquid side of things. And it was there when I and my co-founder Anika, initially we met in China, and we actually helped a project very early on, which no one really wanted to invest in. They were called Matic, right? So Sandeep, JD, they were like the only project in the bear market that shipped, right? We saw a clear product. And so we were trying to help these guys like raise money, but, and again, this is all side hustle stuff, right? And no one like chipped in, and like, yeah, we were like early investors and advisors, but like I wish I could say, yeah, we helped them raise money. We did not, right? Luckily Binance came and put in some money, right? But that was great because we kind of like, at least me and Anika, to our two non-technical folks in this industry, we were at least like able to like get to know developers, and we then got to know Sandeep's brother-in-law, Sachin. He introduced us to Sachin, who wanted to get into Web3 because he has a lot of like Web2 experience, but wanted to sort of plunge in. And so he already did like a bit of work in Web3. And so we're like, yeah, let's kind of work together and see what we could do. And so that's how we started. And I had to, I didn't take that plunge yet because I was like, I can't co-found a company without like meeting the technical guy or like our CTO, right? Like, so I had to go out to India and like be okay with the fact that, okay, like, all right, we're doing this. So yeah, that was like walking into it. You're right. That was definitely a walking scenario. Whereas the China thing was like, no, I jumped. that was a clear jump.
That's this. Thank you for sharing that. There's been so much that's happened over that time frame. That's what, a 6-year time span that you've just gone through, effectively. I think at least, or 7 years.
That was, yeah, like from that university moment till, let's say, the time we founded was like 3-4 years. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you founded Biconomy, what was the underlying premise where you said, I need to do this? What was the underlying premise? I mean, it's evolving and it'll continue to evolve. What was the major?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So one thing that I realized that I'm not good at like if I have a million different options in front of me, it's very hard for me to decide. I'm very indecisive sometimes. So I think God just put like China on my plate, right? And it was like, go ahead with this. And the same thing happened with Biconomy, where it was just clear there was one thing better than the other, right? In terms of opportunity and access. And I think then it was just easy to make that decision. So yeah, I'm not sure if you if that helps, if that answers the question.
It does, but what I want to get to is mainly when you're looking at these ecosystem plays, that you're working with from a product development point of view, a lot of people work on gas fees.
Yeah.
In your process, gasless. So how are you producing revenue as a company? Because it's the way in which Web3 companies generally or typically approach revenue is different. You have people either come from a consultancy background, enterprise background, and the modeling on revenue is slightly unique. But I'm curious, how do you guys make your revenue streams as you evolve your products and services?
Yeah. So we were very clear that we don't want to be a SaaS company, although we had to start off with that initially. It's very clear we want to move, like it's always going to be transaction based, right? And so right now, I think we've finally sort of like got to a pricing point which could make sense. And this is essentially the product is free to integrate and use. You just pay per transaction, right? And that's essentially like a gas premium. So if you think about just gas as a market on these chains, it's huge. Especially the number of transactions that happen on them. And so the more transactions there are, the more they need to also become cheaper as well, right? Because, it's also that sort of, because if you look at sort of just scaling technologies, they need to become cheaper. But again, the more transactions in a way you process and command, then you could, like, we just think of it as premium, right? As a premium for the service and the offering that we're offering to developers. So here, essentially, like how we're thinking about it is, depending on, let's say, the transaction journey that the developer chooses for the application, the gas payer, it could be the end user, it could be the developer, they would pay just a slight premium on gas fees, right? So you could think about, if we save you gas, then we could easily take a cut. But if there are no gas savings, but there is a better UX, then there is a gas premium, right? So that's like as high level as it can be in a very short amount of time in terms of like what the business model and pricing model can be.
I appreciate that. I mean, from an adoption point of view, which you touched on earlier, right? We talked about users and other pieces. I'm also curious to further that question a little bit more about maybe geography or type of users. Today you have data sets of types of users or geography which you're engaging with. And as you're expanding or evolving, do you see yourself going to a different geography for mass adoption or a different set of users for your growth, to try and get to that space where you're talking about the millions of users? What do you see as your path? What's your thought process there? Or what's your visibility there, if you could share that with us?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So for right now, like we have like in a way customers worldwide, and what I mean by that is it could be like a solo developer to an actual like team or a company that is building a use case or an application in the space. And if we sort of maybe go a bit deeper and talk about user personas, it could be an engineering manager or a product manager, or even the founder themselves, right? That sort of understands, why they should integrate Biconomy. And honestly, these guys or girls are literally from all over, right? Like we do have a big, at least in terms of applications or developers from India, just because that's where most of the team is based, or where my co-founders are from. But we do have customers in Europe, in the US, India definitely commands most of it in terms of just the at least in Asia as well. But because of like all these apps are just so different, and they're the ones who are going after their own users as well, right? And so this is where it kind of like goes into like, we always, when we work with customers, it's like, what is that ideal user flow? What is that transaction journey looking like, so that it allows you, because the problem is that you have, let's say, a Web2 app, right? This Web2 app already has a slick UX, but they will have so much trouble getting all the users, right? Web3 apps, on the other hand, right, versus a Web2 app, they can never get to the same Web2 UX, right? So they're not even at the same level of that UX. And so like, imagine trying to get so many new users on board. And so like, they're kind of behind versus a Web2 application, right? And so this is where like, as long as we just like bridge that gap, then they're on the same playing field, right? And so the idea is to really like encourage any of their users, right? Again, like their user personas will be different, right? Because our solution is general. And so that's really how we see it. It's more, we grow as there are more applications and Web3 dApps that are sort of building on the chain.
I think there's going to be no end in sight to that. And, on that note, I would love to, also go into a lot more, but we have limited time here, sadly. But I think I'll pick up a lot of things with you off chat, off this conversation. But Ronit, I think I'm going to hand back to you, brother, to wrap things up. Thanks a lot, Ahmed.
Thank you. Maybe one last question, because we're all zooming in from different parts of the UAE, and you talked about how many of your developers and team are based in India. How do you see this place, Dubai, developing as a 5 years ago, it'd have been hard pressed to call it a tech hub. It was a wannabe. It was a marketing hub. Is this really becoming a tech hub, or is it still a marketing hub?
Really good question. So pre-COVID, I was here. During COVID, I was in London just to be with family. And then I moved back around 5 months ago. And I'm just shocked how different it is, right? Like, you're right. Pre-COVID, very marketing, like very salesy, no understanding of really anything. Again, like when I started, I mean, I was like building Biconomy in Area 2071, thanks to Dubai Blockchain Center and everything around like in 2019. And everyone else was sort of in India. But after COVID, that's when things changed, right? We saw so many Indian companies come to the UAE. We're seeing lots of different, people. And I think that COVID had a lot to play because Dubai opened up and it allowed all these entrepreneurs, all these individuals, and they're like partners from funds, they're solo developers or maybe development teams. And I'm just shocked with the amount of like Web3 people who are here and that, like actual tech people who are here. There is even a group, if you guys want to be added to, it's called the Association of Bad Crypto Sportsmen. And this whole chat is just for crypto people here in Dubai or Abu Dhabi to just actually go play football or just do whatever, but not talk about crypto, right? Just not talk about crypto, right? And it's true, and it's happened. It's so much fun.
Does it include racing drivers?
Yeah, yeah.
Particularly ones with vintage cars.
Hey. Let's go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I do. Like it's so funny. Like I met, like I played football with some guys. We never it was like finish football, you go home. But I met them last week in India. I was like, shit, we played football. But what do you do? Like I have no idea what you do. So it's funny. Like that's how it is. But yeah, like it's a very different scene right now.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been awesome to start this conversation, to carry it on.
For sure. And hope to meet in person. You too. Thanks, Gaurav. Thanks, Ronit. Take care.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.